Am I alive yet?
Man, oh man, I don't know where you are, but I'm sure where you are, it's freezing cold. I'm down here in North Florida, and it is very cold. Yeah, I mean, getting in the 20s at the night, and only maybe the 50s during the day. That's how cold it is. I mean, I hope everybody's staying warm out there. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to it. Welcome to another Sharple's World stream podcast, whatever you want to call it. I'd like to call it just random thoughts and random rants, but whatever. We'll get it figured out at some point. So there's a lot happening today. I mean, the main news story today, of course, is what's going on in Los Angeles and California with the wildfires and everything out there, which is just, I mean, you hate to say it. It happens like it seems like now almost every year, but it's every few years they just have one of those brush fires for whatever reason, either started by an individual or by the high winds knocking power lines down or whatever, but it causes a devastating wildfire incident. And I mean California's already a mess with just the way it's been run. I mean, probably the last 15 years or so. And I've seen all the stories just about how, like, they didn't have water reservoirs filled or water holding areas that they would normally use in these situations filled, which is if that's true, that's just a complete travesty, and that is a failure on not just the state but also the local governing process. I mean, how can you live in a county or live in a state that is just ravaged by fires every year and not have yourself prepared for a situation like that? I mean, down here in Florida, I mean, we have hurricanes every year. I mean, that's just a fact of life. I mean, they've gotten more, depending on the year, you get more and more, some more intense than others. But it's one of those things where we get prepared for it as much as we can. We know that there's going to, depending on the range of the storm, there's going to be some devastation. But, I mean, our local authorities, our state authorities are pretty well on it, because it is just a thing that happens every year. And you think if you were a state that was used to having just any natural disaster that reoccurred every year, you'd be prepared for it every year. But California just seems to be the one state that just can't figure that out. I know there's a lot of politicians always get bashed right away when something goes bad, for some for good reasons, some for not. I mean, that's just how it's always been, even before social media. If there was something that went, even if it was out of control, out of the hands of whatever politician, they're always going to get blamed for it. That's just life. That's just being a politician. But I mean, just seeing how they were not prepared for this, to the fact that fire hydrants were out of water, that the excuse was that the elevation that these fire hydrants were at, water could not get to them fast enough or something like that. Like, that they would fill up to a point and then they'd push that water out and they'd run out of water, and it would take a long time for water to, it was just, I've never heard an excuse like that. I think that it just blows my mind to hear a fire official blame elevation for not being able to get water pumped through a fire hydrant. I mean, you can just say that, well, they're not going to say it, but I mean, you can say something like the water system failed. I mean, you could at least give a little bit of truth on that. But I mean, if get that rabbit. Oh no, the rabbit. Oh, get the rabbit. You want to get the rabbit? Save the rabbit. Oh, it's from 2017. Sorry, sir. Yeah, just look at that. That's just insane, man. So here's the thing: like down here in Florida, we've had a few wildfires throughout the last 25 years or so, but they've never been anything like what they have in California. And that goes to, I think it was back in '97 or '98. Might have been '98. The Daytona area down there caught on fire. We were in a drought for a time period, and I just happened to be down there. I was down there for a bowling tournament in Daytona, and the fire I think had just started that Sunday when we were leaving. So there wasn't much to it, but then it just blew up and it was just huge and destroyed a lot down there in Daytona and the Central Florida area. And the state officials learned from that they needed to do more controlled burning. You know, certain areas of the state were doing it depending on the funding. Some places wouldn't, but after that happened in Daytona, like the entire state realized, like, holy crap, we need to allocate funds to this. And so the entire state of Florida has controlled burns throughout the year. I mean, there's times if you visit Florida, you might see in a distance somewhere if you're on the highway or a highway somewhere that there's smoke rising from some wood somewhere, and the majority of the time that's just the controlled burning. And it's a method used to burn out the underbrush, to burn out damaged trees, to burn out damaged limbs and stuff that become tinder and cause fires like in California. And apparently California has not learned from that at all for whatever reason. They just do not allocate any funds to it or think it's just a waste of time. I do not know. I don't understand how, if you're known for wildfires, that you don't have a better defense for this. But I mean, I guess that's just one of the things with living in California. But anyways, I mean, good luck to the people out there. A bunch of $1 million homes, Liberty homes, probably just being burnt up. And I mean, I'm sure when this is done in the coming weeks, there'll be some politicians that'll lose their job, others that are blamed. I mean, it's not a good look for Gavin, for Newsom out there, who's trying to become a presidential candidate. This is another just chink to the armor of what he proclaims to be, or imagine being on the beach and seeing that. Is that wild, dude? That's kind of beautiful, but also just scary and the same. I mean, you're just out there chilling on the beach and you turn over and you just see a line of fire. That's wild, dude. And why can't these helicopters scoop from the ocean and drop salt water on us? Is that like not a good thing? Anyways, the other fun topic was Trump talking about wanting to buy Greenland, which I don't think is going to happen. In fact, I guarantee that doesn't happen. My man, I mean, I don't have anything positive or negative to say about Trump. With most presidents, I don't care. I'm not that crazy about politicians as it is. But, I mean, you can just tell, like, he says things just to get reactions from the press. I think, like, he gets off and has some sort of cheap thrill on opening his social media and seeing just people having conniption fits about things that he said at a press conference. And then will, like, later come up and claim that he didn't say it. And I think he then gets off on that, too. Just if... like this the younger people that were born probably after 2000 didn't know Trump before his reality show, and so on. I mean, when he was that mega media mogul, or not media mogul, but real estate mogul in New York, this is the kind of crap he did, man. I mean, if you look at the interviews of him in the 80s and 90s, it's the same thing that he did then that he does now. Just then, everybody laughed at it, and they thought it was funny, and they praised him for it. And now it's, they think he's full of crap, and they call him out for it, which some things he should be called out for. But other stuff is just, you can just tell that he's just playing a game. And it's just, he gets his little cheap thrill of saying things and getting the media all, razzled and frazzled, and then probably sits back there for the next 3 hours reading social media posts and just laughing about how he's controlled that situation. So, listen, the United States is not buying Greenland. We're not changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. That's just not happening. I mean, I mean, honestly, for us down here in Florida, I've never really like thought like we should change it to the Gulf of the U.S. or the Gulf of the United States. I mean, that never like I think maybe like Gulf of Florida has come across my mind at times just because it's right along the Florida coast. But then I mean, you could do the same thing with Louisiana and Texas because it's just there. But it's one of those things where I mean, for us here in Florida, it almost added like an exotic appeal calling it the Gulf of Mexico because it sounds exotic. It sounds like you're getting closer to the Caribbean and just that beach lifestyle, the palm trees and stuff like that. So it's just no one has really ever cared. And I mean, all the crazy right wings are gonna really throw Gulf of America it should be Gulf of America, but to me, it just doesn't ring right. It just doesn't sound right. And the reason why it's the Gulf of Mexico is because Mexico owned a majority of the United States up until like the late 1700s, early 1800s when we started pushing west and either buying it or just straight up taking it from them. So there's a reason why it was called the Gulf of Mexico before we even became the United States. I mean, it's just not going to change. I mean, the only time like things like that change is if you invade a country and you take over that country and you decide I'm going to rename this because we've conquered you, and it's just not going to happen. So people can just get over the purchasing Greenland, get over the renaming the Gulf of America and all this other stuff because it's just not going to happen, man. It's just at some point like this it'll dissipate and it'll be one of those things that Trump is known for, just saying stuff to say stuff to get people all hyperactive about what he's saying, and then just people will forget about it. But I love the reactions of like the Mexican president and the Canadian officials claiming that, oh, why don't we just have states? Why don't we take our states back? It's just, why even play that game? I mean, this is when I know politics has always been kind of childish, but when has it become this, dude? It's just, your world leaders, for Christ's sake. If somebody's acting like a child, just ignore them, man, or just ignore her, whatever it is. This tit for tat nonsense, it just gets stupid. I'm pretty over it, but there are some people in the world that love that stuff, that love the baby childish nonsense. And if that's you, man, I pray for I pray for you because that's just, I don't know why you want that particular. I just want a calm, regular life where I don't have to worry about nonsense, pay my bills, hang out, do what I need to do, and not worry about going to war with Mexico because we want to change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. It's just so stupid. It's not going to happen, so just get that out of your head. Well, another news, I did a cast on Star Wars and the state of it, and we went through, well, I went through just where Star Wars is at and what it needs to do to improve. And one of the other things is Marvel. I mean, DC is basically dead. I mean, let's be honest. That universe was dead on arrival with a majority of those movies that when they tried to keep up with Marvel, it just did not take off. It did not hit. I mean, I'm sure the Zack Snyder kids are all about it, but to me, nothing appealed to me with the DC universe. Marvel, I mean, ever since Endgame, you've had maybe two movies that were fantastic, and those two dealt with the multiverse, and that was Spider-Man. Well, Spider-Man Far From Home was good. That was a decent one, but Spider-Man No Way Home and the Deadpool Wolverine have basically been the best that Marvel has had since Endgame, and that's, I mean, that is by far. I mean, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse, I thought it was good. I know there's a lot of people that weren't fans of it, but I thought it was good. Then of course, I mean, you've had the misses, you've had the Marvels that just didn't appeal to anybody for many reasons. The whole woke now stuff and the whole people hating Brie. I don't get into that. To me, one, I didn't watch that series, Miss Marvel. That didn't appeal to me at all. So her being in that movie, just I could care less. that character didn't do anything for me. I mean, getting into the series, they've maybe had what, two, maybe three decent series. WandaVision was good, even though people were kind of upset with the way it ended. Then you had Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which was, I mean, it was a popcorn series. It was what it was. I don't think it was necessarily that bad. I don't think it was that good. You've had Moon Knight, which I thought Moon Knight was decent. I thought that was a good introduction for that character for somebody that I've never really paid attention to. I thought that was I mean, it was a mind trip. Let's just be honest. I mean, it was a mind trip of a show, but I thought that was good. Even though a lot of people didn't really care for that either. Of course, you then had She-Hulk, which was just a travesty. I mean, that was one I think I watched up until Daredevil showed up, and then after that, I just didn't, and I don't even think I really watched up to that. I think maybe I watched like the first two episodes and was just like, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, She-Hulk to me, even when I was growing up, I just didn't pay attention to. So either way, it didn't bother me, positive or negative. But that show, like, it did not grab me like some of the other ones did. And I did watch when Daredevil was on there, which those were great episodes. And then I had to stop watching after that because it got weird. And apparently, like, just that whole series towards the end was weird, the twerk and stuff and everything like, which again, that I wouldn't have cared either way for, but at the same time, why does that need to be in the show? But whatever, you had the twerking Hulk. And you had that one pretty much bombed. Loki, of course, I think that's probably been the only really good series that they've put out. Now, you can say what you will about certain episodes. Sure, the filler episodes that have just been, just weren't as good. But as a series, season 1 and 2 have probably been the best they've done. Then, of course, you had that Secret Invasion that had so much potential, and they just completely dog-napped the hell out of that series. That just was a cluster of a cluster. I think that was probably worse than the She-Hulk. Yeah, I mean, I think I get that as a universe, you have to introduce new characters. I understand, I get that. I understand what Marvel and Disney were doing with that. But the problem is they were introducing characters that either people did not know or did not care for. And you could have done things with those particular, like the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Nobody knew who Guardians of the Galaxy were, and probably nobody cared. I mean, they were such a fringe group in the comic book lore, but James Gunn did something with it and turned it into something great. And you had these characters that you could have done something with and made them great in a series, but instead, it's almost like you had writers that just wanted to put their own nonsense and their own view of things or how the characters should be into these series. It just destroyed it, man, and really took a lot of the hot air out of the room for Marvel, to the point that, I mean, even the movies, most of the movies that you had, like, in this time period up until, Deadpool and Wolverine have just been meh, just not there. I mean, well, let's look at this. We can and see where Marvel's missed a lot. So you had the externals, which again, characters that probably, unless you were really into the comic book lore, you probably had no idea who they were, probably didn't care who they were. At the end of that movie, you have a Celestial, I think is what they were called, a Celestial, that came out of the Earth. So you have like half his hand and his head sticking out. I think it was in the Indian Ocean, I'm not real sure. And then at the end of the movie, you have one show up and basically blot the sun out. He's so damn big, to where half of the world sees a giant celestial face speak out, pull a few people from the earth and disappear. And then in every movie from after that, in every series really, nothing is mentioned about anything. Nothing is mentioned about the giant hand, except for I think in She-Hulk, they finally mentioned it, like on a newspaper off to the side, but it was never talked about. It was basically just kind of pushed away, like We're going to ignore that there's a giant robot hand and head sticking out of the Indian Ocean. We're going to ignore that a giant robot appeared in the heavens and blotted the sun out and probably traumatized half of the world half of the world at that time. We're just going to ignore that and do nothing with it until what? I think they're finally doing something with it now with that new Captain America movie that's coming out. But I mean, you're 5-6 years after that movie, and it's just. I mean, if you're gonna make a movie and have a giant figurehead stick out of the ocean or show up in the sky at the end of the movie, you can't ignore something like that for 5 years. That is lunacy at its highest level. So you had that. You had them just picking the wrong characters to go with. You had them retiring and ending certain arcs of very popular characters, which I get. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. was done doing Iron Man at that point, and even Chris Evans was done being Captain America. But there's things that could have, different ways you could have handled those situations, but it is what it is. And the only really successful, elements that you've had, or successful movies or series that you might have had since Endgame, have all been the multiverse related stuff. I mean, you had set up the future for Kang. You had Kang, who was going to come, which would have been really interesting to see. But then, of course, Jonathan Majors got into his trouble, and that ended that whole idea of Kang, and they basically have just pushed Kang aside, which I guess they're going to probably, my guess is with this whole thing of them going to the Doom stuff with Robert Downey Jr.'s Doom, my guess is that they're going to just, like, Doom's going to mention killing Kang, like, off screen, like, whenever he's introduced, and somehow getting a hold of Kang's powers. That would be my guess, because I know that there was a possible, like, screenplay play leak of the Kang Dynasty, which started off with all those Kangs at the end of Ant-Man showing up to Earth and basically just destroying everything. I mean, taking out cities, taking out countries, and taking out heroes. Like, there was a bunch of heroes that would get killed off in that first movie. And I think the end of that first movie, because it was going to be a 2 movie, it was going to be Kang Dynasty, and then the second one with the Avengers getting their revenge, and then going into Secret Wars. But I think they were going to have where that Kang from Ant-Man that was sucked into the quantum realm, or whatever he was sucked into, found a way out of what he was sucked into and basically destroys all the other Kangs, and then decides to, since he's the only one, that he's going to dominate the universe, and he's going to make the universe how he wants it, or how it should be. And that's when you had the Avengers fight him. And I think it was going to be one of those things where he was going to create, like, Battle World, or create one of those worlds, and it would be Secret Wars. But since that's not happening now, I think you're going to have, because Doom shows up at one point and kills Kang, I believe in Secret Wars, and becomes like God Doom, or I think, or something like that. And so I think that's what they're going to do with this, is where you're just going to have Robert Downey Jr.'s Doom kill off Kang off screen somewhere, and become this ultimate Doom, which will then lead to Secret Wars, and then they'll reshape and do a reboot, a soft reboot, to which you'll then lead into all the, where you'll have mutants in the same world. Because I don't know how many people know or have seen, but there was a deleted scene that was an ending after credit scene, post credit scene of the first Iron Man. Now, the one that we all saw was Nick Fury saying, in Stark's home, saying, "I am Iron Man," and saying, "You have no idea what you just stepped into. You've just stepped into a universe of heroes," and that was the beginning of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, there was a deleted scene that they weren't approved to use, to which Nick Fury basically mentions Spider-Man, mentions mutants, and I think maybe one other thing. But Disney could not use that because they did not own the rights to the mutants, or Spider-Man because Fox had the mutants and Sony had Spider-Man. And man, what a miss. That's one of those things where it's like, if Disney had that idea of what they were building with the Marvel Universe, if they didn't go to Fox or Sony and say, hey, look, this is what they're doing. Do you guys want to get in and play in our playground? If you do, though, this is how it needs to be done. If they didn't do that, then what a miss, dude. And if they did do that and Fox and Sony just passed at first thinking that they were going to do their own thing, what a miss, because you could have generated billions and billions of dollars for all those studios, which now, I mean, Disney bought Fox, so that is what it is. And Sony has checked out of the Spider-Man universe because they completely crapped that universe. I mean, talk about just a way to ruin a whole catalog of bad guys. Good job, Sony. Jesus Christ, you can get your stuff correct. But so, I mean, yeah, besides the two Spider-Man movies, maybe the Doctor Strange movie and Deadpool and Wolverine, Marvel's just missed on a lot of stuff. And I think it's they just didn't know where they were going to go with a lot of these stories, and they were introducing characters that honestly people just did not care about. But hopefully the future they figure this out now. And what'll be interesting is after they do this latest conglomeration, the Doom stuff, the Secret Wars, where it goes to after that. I mean, will they keep people engaged, which I don't think they will. I think people want to see those movies where there's all the heroes in them. I think that's just where it is now. If I was Disney, honest, I would do solo movies and just release them straight to Disney Plus or have them as series, and then just do like the Avengers type stuff where they're all together as theatrical releases. But I mean, they probably won't do that, and I just don't know how well the product will be after they do this Doomsday and Secret Wars. But I mean, we'll find out. We'll see. But to me, I think you're coming towards the cusp of the end of this comic book era, and sucks for DC because they can never get it figured out, and I think they're too late in the game to really figure it out now with this new James Gunn Superman, which I honestly am not going to see, but that's just me. I mean, I'll probably watch it if it ever comes out on TV or if it's on Blu-ray or DVD, but it does not appeal to me. It was, again, when I was growing up, Superman just was too Boy Scout for me. It was just, I was a Batman dude, and he just doesn't do it. Speaking of growing up, I know pretty much sitcoms, that sitcom era is dead in America. It's over. I mean, it started in the 50s at the beginning of television, when television was trying to figure out what to do with itself. Sitcoms really started in the 50s, and I'd say the golden era for them was probably the 80s and 90s. I mean, because you just had, I mean, a lot of people can't picture this now, but you had a time period there. I mean, cable didn't really start until the late 70s. So you had a time period there where you might have had 5 channels at the most, and sitcoms ran, I mean, a good portion of television. And even when cable first came out, sitcoms, I mean, were still just running things. I mean, because cable was just, I mean, the HBOs, they weren't really producing shows. They were just putting movies on, So, like, during the 90s, for me, first off, I was born in 81, so beginning of the 90s, I'm like 9 years old. We had your weekend was pretty much set on TGIF. That was on Friday, and then when SNCC came along, I think in 92, on Saturdays. So your Friday and Saturday when you were a kid, by 8 o'clock you were in the house watching TGIF, and then Saturday watching SNCC. Now during the summer that was different because it was all reruns, but I mean from September till about April or May, whenever they finally ended, I mean your Friday and Saturday nights were in front of the television as a kid. It was TGIF Fridays, SNCC Saturdays. I mean, TGIF, from what I remember when I first started watching it, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but for me it was, you had Family Matters, you had Step by Step, Full House, And then you either had, depending on when you started watching, I think at first we had Dinosaurs, and then it became Boy Meets World. And those were like the main four. Now I know when it first started, it was completely different. It was like Perfect Strangers and Full House and a few other things. But at my age, when I started watching it, about '91, it was Family Matters, Step by Step, Full House, and Dinosaurs, and then Boy Meets World or whatever it was. And I think I watched like the first season of Boy Meets World, maybe the second, but it just didn't appeal to me. And especially when they did the college stuff, I think I watched a few episodes and it just didn't do anything for me. Family Matters was the big one, and it was one of those things too. Like when you were growing up and watching that, you didn't understand. Like you understood when Urkel took over that, like Urkel was always there. That he was one that when you were a kid, he just became part of the show. It just was what it was. Like you didn't realize that it became Urkel's Matters. Like that's what that show became. It became Urkel Matters. It was no longer Family Matters. It was Urkel Matters. But when we were growing up, I mean, there was no social media. I mean, you didn't hear people complaining or even realize that. It was just Urkel was a part of that show. It was still Family Matters, but he was now a part of that show. But it's like some of the stuff you've seen in the last like 10 years that have come out, and you really look into that, it's like, yeah, holy crap, like that character hijacked that show. And it was one of those things too. It's like me and my brothers, we never realized that the youngest daughter had even left the show. Like her family like pulled her after the third or fourth season because she just wasn't getting any scenes or any lines. And they were just like, forget it, and they pulled her. We didn't even know she was gone. She was gone, dude. Like that's how much Urkel and even that little kid Richie had just taken over that show. Like they just, one of them left, and nobody even noticed. Nobody even cared. Then you had the Step by Step series, which was good, and they had one of those guys in Cousin Cody. I remember when he showed up, Cousin Cody kind of took over. Full House was coming towards the end of its run there, and then we had Dinosaurs, which, hey, if you have Disney Plus, do yourself a favor and watch that entire series, because it honestly, for what it was ahead of its time. And I know you're going to say, like, dude, how is a show about people in giant rubber dinosaur animatronic suits ahead of its time? Picture, like, Roseanne, Home Improvement, and The Simpsons all tied into one, but they're dinosaurs. That's, like, the best way I could put it. Like, it was zany, it was wild, it was crazy, but at the same time, they would cover serious topics in it. To stuff like when I was a kid, I didn't even realize it was being talked about until I watched it later in life. I'm like, wow, like some of those episodes are really deep. Not to mention the fact that it has probably the saddest series finale you will ever see out of any sitcom ever. I mean, just dark, saddest, I mean, if you're wondering, like, how is it dark or sad? I mean, just think, how did it end for the dinosaurs on this planet? And then think about, okay, how would a series finale end with the dinosaurs? So if you get a chance on Disney Plus, go find it and watch it, because that the whole series is great. Do yourself a favor. The other thing, like, I remember about just 90s sitcoms is they always had themed episodes. Like you'd have your Christmas episode, you'd have your Halloween episode, of course. But there were always like these ones that were themed, and I don't remember if it was the studios that were making them do it or what, but you'd have the gun episode, you'd have the drug episode, you'd have the alcohol episode, you'd have the bully episode, you'd have the, I don't want to say like sexual assault, but you'd have the one where it was close to like being a sexual assault episode. You'd have the abuse episode. You'd have the, like the neighborhood's getting too dangerous episode, or the crazy friend. You'd have this like the self-harm episode. You'd have all these episodes that were just every sitcom of that time period, kid sitcom, would have one of those episodes or two episodes like a year, depending on which one they thought was valid at the point. And to the point, like I remember when Family Matters did their gun episode, and it was like somebody had brought a gun to the school that Laura, Urkel, and the kids had went to. And I can't remember if it was like the guy was showing it off and it accidentally shot, or he was pulling out of his pocket and shot. But I remember like it hit, I think it was one of Laura's friends, like shot. I think maybe her name was Maxine. I can't recall, but it hit one of them, and it was this thing where they decided that they were going to have at the school a gun drop off where they would, with no questions asked, they'd have people that wanted to turn in guns just to get them off the street. And I just remember it was like nobody, like they're coming to the end of the gun turning, and like they got they got nobody turning, like nobody's turned in a gun. They've been there all day, nobody's turned in a gun. And right before they're about to call it quits, like this like 8-year-old kid like brings his older brother up and does this whole like puppy dog look up to him, and the older brother does like that, oh man, like like I can't believe you got me doing this, kind of look, and he puts a handgun into the bucket, and then they walk off. And like the ending of it was like, well, we might not have got as much as we want, but at least we got one off the street. Let's just saving one kid from doing something stupid or being injured. And it was just so thinking about it now. I mean, cheesy 90 cheese as anything could be, but at that time, dude, like, I mean, I remember just at that age, like that was just a serious thing. And the other episode, I think it was on Step by Step, where it was the alcohol episode, and I think it was where you had one of the daughters that went to visit, I think two or maybe one of the other older sisters at college, and she's still in high school and gets invited to a party and just gets wasted, just gets completely just trashed. And the episode was about like what could have happened to her with her being drunk and her being a party girl and everything like that. And it was this whole thing. And it ends with the other sisters giving her hell, and I don't even know if like the parents got involved. And the whole like, yeah, kids should stay away from alcohol, that whole the speech. Then you have the drug ones where it was someone finds weed, or I think mostly in the 90s it was weed, and you'd have that whole you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't do that episode. And one of the other ones that I remember was like, I think it was the domestic abuse, and I think it was also Step by Step, and I think it was the Dana character who was in like an abusive relationship, and Cody, the cousin who had like a crush on the Dana, who was the stepchild that had been married in, like finds out like she's being like roughed up, and I think it was like she had bruises on her arms. I don't think it was like anything like on the face or the body. And he ends up like beating the guy up for like hitting on women or doing it. Like, and then a couple years after that, the guy who played Cody, ended up getting arrested for domestic abuse. So you got the guy from the episode, saving the girl from this situation, later being arrested in real life for that. Just a trip. But that's one thing that like you can't do anymore with these streaming episodes. I mean, you could have, I don't even know if they would be called sitcoms. I guess you could call them streamcoms if they have that anymore. But it's like I don't, even the sitcoms that are on these days, you just don't hear people talking about them or having the water cooler, meetup. Like when Friends came out in '94, I watched the first 2 seasons, and then I started playing football in high school, and our games were on Thursdays, so I kind of got away from doing that, watching Friends, because our games would go until I think like 8:30. I think we started at 6:30, and they went till about 8:30. So I would always I'd miss the episode of Friends, but I got more into Seinfeld like later in that time period. And it was one of those things where so I get like when you have a pilot, and even that first season, the characters change drastically if it's picked up from the first to second season. That just, if you look at any sitcom, like that first season to the second season, the characters are completely different. Even like maybe the house that they lived in or where they lived might even drastically change. But it wasn't until COVID when TBS would run, I should say the pandemic, when TBS was running Friends like every day from maybe like 11 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. They'd run the episodes back to back to back. Like I would have the TV on while I was working, and it was like background noise, But I think I went for those 6 months I was working from home. It was like from May to October. I think I went through that series 4 times from the first episode to the last. And one, hey, after like 99 2000, I can I almost had to stop watching then. That show just got just stupid. Just there was, I mean, you could tell they had run out of ideas and were just basically crossing streams with, well, let's have the so and so hook up with so and so, and then have let's imply that so and so is hooking up with so and so. What they're really, and it just you could tell the writers were just out of just anything, dude. It just became pointless. I mean, it's like I remember the girlfriend I was dating at the time crying at the finale when it came on in I think '04, and I just remember like sitting there on the couch like, you're crying over this, like we're crying over the end of a show, like this show jumped the shark probably 3 years ago, but you're crying. I mean, they're not dying, the show's just over, it had to end. But getting back to like the pilot episode, if you watch the pilot episode of Friends, one, there were three drastic changes of characters from that first episode throughout the entire thing. One, Phoebe is the only one that stayed basically the same from the first episode to the end of that series. Like, she just stayed the mindless, bimbo, whatever it was, free-willed. And even on some level, the Rachel character stayed the same. And Chandler, I mean, he had his ups and downs, but it was kind of the same character. But if you look at Joey in the first 2 episodes, like, yeah, he was slow, but it wasn't like he was a mimbo of what they like turned him into. Like, he was more of that. Oh, he's cute and he's pretty, but he was still like he still had a decent IQ in those first couple episodes. And then they just completely just threw him off the edge and were like, no, let's make him just the perfect idiot. Like, he'll be just the good-looking mimbo. And he went from a guy that might have had a thought in his brain to just a complete dunce. Ross was the other one. Dude, that dude showed up like a manic depressant, crying about everything. Okay. To becoming like the opposite of the bipolar chain, just a manic craze, to where he became, I mean, stalkerish on some, like, his relationship with Rachel. Holy crap. I mean, was that not the most toxic, besides maybe Sam and Diane? Was that not the most toxic relationship that has been on sitcom ever? I mean, the stuff they did to each other and how they treated each other. Holy crap. I mean, you'd be in jail today for some of the stuff they did. But yeah, his character development was just wild. And then Monica. Monica was like the only sane character in that first 2 seasons, maybe even the first 3. And then they completely pushed her over the edge and made her a complete psychotic. She went from being the probably the base of the show, the most normal one on the show, and completely just made her one of the more psychotic individuals in a snap of a finger. And it's just interesting how that show went, knocking stuff over, how that show went from being a comedy, but kind of like a dramedy comedy, to just being a complete psycho comedy as it progressed on. Not to mention that a majority of their storylines were stolen from other shows and other series. I remember, like, when I was in that flux of watching the series nonstop, I was also watching reruns of Seinfeld, and I'd sit there and I would go, holy crap. And I'd look the date up on it, and you would see, like, a Seinfeld episode had been on maybe years before, and now Friends, their writers basically just stole storylines and maybe changed it up a little, but it was basically a Seinfeld episode. And they just basically took, like, a storyline from Seinfeld and put it in Friends, hoping that people wouldn't notice or just not really caring. And it was to the point that, I mean, the plagiarism was so bad. I mean, they would take characters, or they would take actors that were in Seinfeld and basically put them in Friends. I mean, you had Jason Alexander show up and played a small, role one time on Friends. And that right there kind of really turned me off to Friends too, because I mean, there was at least 6 or 7 episodes that were just plagiarized straight from Seinfeld. And if they were doing that to just Seinfeld, I can only imagine other shows that I haven't seen or haven't paid attention to that they just straight up plagiarized and just made Friends episodes of. So, hey, I know some people think Friends is the greatest sitcom ever. I'm gonna tell you, man, it's not. It's one of the probably more overhyped. I mean, it was funny. I give it. It was funny to a point. And there are some episodes that are really funny, but for the most, I mean, that thing was the most over plagiarized, overhyped sitcom I've seen. But God, I remember the hype for that when it first came out in '94. Like NBC was on the hype train for Friends to the point that I don't remember what the opening numbers were, but I think it was pretty decent. And then it just took off. But God, I remember watching. I think it was NBC did a special, like, or maybe it was ET. I don't know who it was, but where they like went behind the scenes before the series was going to start and got like a tour of the set, and then it just blew up, man. But yeah, that's one thing that I kind of miss about television was where the focus you had to be at a specific time, a specific place to watch these episodes or watch these shows. It was just, I mean, it was a period in time that will never come back. I mean, unless streaming just ultimately dies, which I don't think it will. I think, unfortunately, at some point, everything's going to go to some sort of streaming network. You don't have that, well, you have to be here on this day at a particular time to watch it because it's not going to replay again until the summer or maybe down the road. And that's one thing that yeah, is definitely missed in today's world. And I think that's I mean, I think that's one thing that's kind of wrong with society. It's just, I get if like maybe you're out doing things, keeping yourself healthy. I can understand why streaming is good because you can watch things when you want to watch. But there's some stuff where people are just sitting there just streaming nonstop, and it's something that I think it's just there's too much to offer for people. They can just come home and be lazy and just, oh well, I missed it. Well, that's okay. I'll just I can start at any time I want to. I'm just gonna sit here on my couch for 3 hours, doing nothing, eating pork rinds, drinking Dr. Pepper, and I can watch it later. So yeah, I do that time period from especially the 90s. If you grew up in the 90s, was just a great time period for television. I don't really have much else. I mean, now it just hit me. It's like, God, do you remember? I don't know if everybody remembers, but NBC. I mean, remember CBS? It might be like the king of stuff now, but CBS at the time was just trash television. And I mean, you had NBC Thursday night lineup, which was called Must See TV. There was a time period there where your Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, depending on how old you were, was filled. Thursday night, you were watching NBC. Friday night, you were watching ABC for TGIF. And then Saturday, you were watching Nickelodeon for Snick. And I mean, that was your 3-night period. That was your 3-night block from that time period. And again, just something that you just won't ever have again. And it kind of sucks that this younger generation won't get that kind of, I don't want to say appeal, but just to go through that, just to, again, needing to be there for a particular time to watch a show, or else you might not be able to see it again until reruns or until it goes in syndication. But it is what it is. Like and subscribe. Hit the like, hit subscribe. We'll definitely have more coming in the future. I don't have much more to do or to say at this time period. I would tell people, hey, don't take things too seriously out there. Life is short. Can't go too off the wall about things, man. Hey, no sense of going nonsense on things that don't make sense or things that you can't control. Focus on you. Take care of yourself. Stay warm, and if you're in the fires, get the hell out. Otherwise, Hey, peace to everybody. Take care of yourself out there. Until we meet.
Hello? What happened? Where am I? Am I alive yet?